We'll do some start-sit questions for Week 5 next on Fantasy Football Today in 5. Welcome to FFT in 5. I'm Chris Towers. I'm here with Dave Richard. And before we get to some of the start-sit questions, we got some injury news updates. Wednesday, obviously, the first day that most of the teams are practicing for the week. And the biggest one, I just got the notification on my little Apple Watch here, is Jonathan Taylor was a full participant in practice on Wednesday. They opened up the 21-day window for him to return to practice, coming off off-season ankle injury or surgery, on the PUP list to open the season. But the fact that he's practicing in full the first day he's eligible, I kind of think he's going to play this week, Dave. How are you approaching it?
Well, it would be weirder if he were limited, to be perfectly honest with you. He's been on the sideline for the last 4 weeks. And so if he comes to practice and he's limited, I would take that as a very bad sign. So I think this is expected. Shane Steichen said that they would rotate him in when he's ready to play. I'm a little hesitant on 2 fronts to start Jonathan Taylor. Actually, it's 3 fronts. Number one, first game in this offense. He hasn't even today was his first day practicing
at all. Yeah.
And with this quarterback. So it shouldn't take him too long to get up to speed. He's a running back after all, but it's just an issue. Number 2, he's taking on the Titans. And this is a Titans defense that's been pretty good against the run. And number 3, I don't know how much he's going to play. I don't know how effective he'll be. He's literally going from working out at home to going onto a football field. Now, he's an amazing talent, and I love him. But I also am not sure if that upside from week to week will be there like it would have been in years past, because he's sharing not only with Anthony Richardson, but maybe a little bit with Zach Moss, a little bit.
Especially this week, I think.
Oh, for sure. Like he'll share. I would assume that he would share a lot this week and then less so as we move forward. Be happy if you've made it this long with Jonathan Taylor on your fantasy team. Hopefully you're not 0-4. You can start him as a low-end number 2 fantasy running back. I'm not going to go crazy and put him in my top 15. Not yet.
Yeah, I've got both him and Zach Moss as like low-end RB2s for this week. Partially that's because there aren't a lot of great options, and you might be looking at a situation where you've got like Zach Moss or Dameon Pierce. Well, I might just go with Zach Moss even if Jonathan Taylor's back, just because Dameon Pierce has been so crummy this season. But
I know.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I'd take Pierce. I think he's probably got the better chance to score, and he's got technically a better matchup than the Colts do.
Yeah, that's true. The Titans have allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to running backs this season. So it's been a real issue. They funnel teams to the pass. Let's move on to some of these start-sit questions. I want to start with quarterback. CJ Stroud. Last week I said if he has a good game against the Steelers, I think it's all systems go. And yet I do find myself a little wary. It's not that Atlanta's like a super tough matchup. They're like a middle of the pack defense probably, but they are so perfectly content to slow everything down and grind everything out and win. Like the ideal Arthur Smith win is like 17-14. And so I do worry a little bit about that, but he's a top 10 quarterback for me. Are you starting CJ Stroud this week?
I'm not starting him as a top 10 guy. I think he's a terrific bye week replacement. As of now, I would start him ahead of Joe Burrow and ahead of Dak Prescott. I think he's in that range of being a top or a 20-point fantasy, 20 fantasy point. I speak for a living, 20 fantasy points or so. But the Falcons did a really good job defensively last week against Trevor Lawrence, and they didn't give up 20 fantasy points, and they still lost. And so they might play the type of game that Arthur Smith is cool with. Guess what? D'Amico Ryans and the Texans might be cool with it too. And I actually think they'll have a better answer for the receivers, the Falcons will, than the Steelers had last week. So I'm not as excited about CJ Stroud for this week, but fantasy managers who have him should be, because he's really talented.
Let's talk about Miles Sanders, who, I mean, he's getting the workload. even last week. Last week was a relatively bad game. 13 carries, 3 receptions, 3 targets. He mostly split touches with Chuba Hubbard, but 54 carries and 23 targets through 4 games is a really, really nice workload. He just hasn't been able to turn it into anything. He's dealing with this groin injury. Sounds like you're not starting Miles Sanders this week.
I would try to sit him. Like Dameon Pierce ahead of him, Jonathan Taylor probably ahead of him, even though we're expecting Jonathan Taylor to not be some sort of like awesome volume running back this week. And so that's why I said it. Bottom line is this: he's been terrible, and he saw a season low 43% of the snaps last week, barely played in the second half last week. I think the Panthers might be getting a little tired of him averaging 1, 2, 2.5 yards per carry. His rushing average has actually gone down every single game this season. You're counting on him to make a play through the air because the Lions' run defense has come to play, and I think they're going to continue to slam on the run. And you're counting on him to score a touchdown. And I just don't know if there's going to be much of that for him. I'd sit him. I'd look for almost anybody else at running back if I could help it.
Before we finish, I do want to ask you one more start-sit question because I know you're high on this guy and you got some good numbers on him. We're starting Cole Kmet, right?
He's a streamer. No question about it, but I like him better in PPR than non-PPR. And yeah, his first 3 games of the year, target share was 18%. First game without Chase Claypool, that was back on Sunday against Denver, 28% target share. Now, I have to say, if you didn't watch Cole Kmet play, you missed him scoring touchdowns on broken plays. Like, that's how bad Denver is. They left Cole Kmet wide open. And he did that a lot last year, too. So you're kind of hoping that that's the case for Kmet against the Commanders. But Washington's been really good against tight ends this season. Tops in fantasy points allowed. Dallas Goedert had a terrible game. Ertz, even with 10 targets, this is all the way back in week 1. It seems like ages ago. Not a great game. I'd be hesitant to use Cole Kmet, even though he's got an opportunity to get a good target share. But I'm not sure he's anything more than a streamer for now. And the tough matchup on the short week does not help.
Yeah, 13 catches for 22 yards and 13 catches on 22 targets for 83 yards is where tight ends are at against Washington this season. So they've been very, very tough. I don't know. The vibes were a little better in Chicago last week because the offense finally got going. I think things are going to turn right back around against Washington. I think it's a tough matchup, and I have no faith in this Chicago offense.
I'm not going to say it's a full 180. Let's call it a 90-degree turn, Chris.
Sure.
I think there's still some good there. Just Washington's not great against the deep ball, and that's something that Justin Fields can actually do. So I would expect Fields to get some good numbers on throws of 15-plus air yards, but he's not running like crazy. He only had 2 design runs last week, and I do think, unfortunately, a lot of the numbers that he had in week 4 was because of who they were playing.
All right, that's going to do it for FFT and 5. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more start sits for week 5. We'll see you then.